Well, good morning and welcome. It is January. It's the first month of the year. It's a time that many people take a break, and so many in our community are away, resting, travelling, visiting family, and still others are visiting with us this morning. And you are most welcome. As we do so every Sunday in this beautiful old church, we gather together to remind ourselves that there is more to life than what we can see. This world is so much bigger than our own small horizons. Together, we lift our eyes to a reality that is beyond our knowing, beyond our understanding. And for that reason, we begin today with a psalm that gives that reality a name, God. And so I invite you to stand. And if you would speak those words in italics, and so we will read responsively. Psalm 29. Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of his name. Worship the Lord in holy splendour. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord over mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The ancient forests tremble. The mountain ranges skip like spring colts. The high ridges jump like wild goats. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord causes the oaks to whirl and strips the forest bare, and in his temple all say glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as King forever. May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace. Would you remain standing as we sing? Please be seated. I welcome you to Collins Street Baptist Church this morning, all of those who are here in person and those who are joining us online. I received 3 emails in the last week, one from someone sitting in their lounge room in Exeter in the UK, someone else from Iowa in the USA, and another from New Zealand. So to all of you, welcome wherever you are. We are so glad that you are here. And to those who have made the journey, we are so very glad that you are here too. Would you stand with me? The peace of the Lord be with you. And also with you. Why don't you turn and share that peace with those around you?
Now, a welcome again. You've had a welcome from Simon. I'm Neil, one of the people in the congregation. Very lovely to have you all here. And I hope you enjoy this lovely place, but above all that you sense a real sense of the Spirit of God amongst us here. Now, I know there are a lot of people here whom I don't know. A lot of people are visiting this morning. Some I do. I've met a couple here whom I've known for many years through the Wellspring community at Ashburton Baptist. They're here for the weekend. I've met a woman whose name is Alison and her 2 children who have come to see to us today. There's some folk from Auckland. There are a person from Auckland from Canberra whose name I didn't catch, and others whom I simply haven't met. So if you haven't been before, or if you've just come on the odd occasion, you're very welcome. And we hope that afterwards, if you've got a bit of time, you can just join in a cup of tea or coffee or something at the end, so that you can just get to know us a bit more and have a relax together. It's a lovely thing to have you with us. This, of course, is the first in a series where we have special guest preachers, or not preachers, people who present in some particular way, not necessarily preaching. And this morning it's Professor Wendy Brown, who works primarily at the Alfred Hospital and has a role with the Monash University. Wendy, welcome. Lovely to have you here, and we look forward to your taking part. And this is not actually a specifically significant point, but she's sitting next to Brenda, who is the guest speaker next week. Now, I thought there might have been somebody else in the row, but there's not. But however, in both cases, it's nice to have people who have a particular background and experience to present. Apart from the very practical thing about having tea and coffee afterwards, I perhaps take the opportunity to mention, because there are so many who are new here, that although there is a toilet at the back just off the foyer, it's only one, and we have a lot more toilets, much more easy to access, where you simply go through the curtains, or the curtains will be open, through on the right-hand side as you're looking at it now. There are toilets there too. It's just so that you and others perhaps who haven't realise know that they're there. So, on this beautiful morning, we're going to now come to the time when we think about the gifts that we give. If you've come wanting to give something today, the way we do it here at the moment is that there's not an offering bag sent around. There are 2 bowls at the head of each of these 2 aisles, and you might like to make a contribution that way. Or you may well have done it online, as many people do. So when we pray concerning our giving now, we are thinking of both ways of giving. Either way, this is part of our worship together. Would you join me in prayer? Lord, may our commitment to you be unswerving. May our service to others be truly self-giving. May our fellowship with each other be warm. May our love for you and for our neighbours be genuine. And may our gifts for the work of this church be generous. Bless these gifts to help your kingdom come on earth, a kingdom of love and reconciliation. We praise you, O God. Amen.
As Neil has just reminded us, thank you, Neil, in these 4 weeks of January, we are considering together a proposition. It's the proposition of Psalm 139 that you and I are fearfully and wonderfully made. It's an ancient proposition. It dates back to the 7th century BCE. That makes this proposition, this idea, thousands of years old. People of Jewish and Christian faith pay special attention to these words because they are included in our sacred texts. We assume their importance or their truth at some level. But even for those who have no particular regard for the Bible, the fact that this proposition has been around for such a long time makes it at least worth considering. Why does it persist? How does this idea that we are fearfully and wonderfully made relate to our understanding of what it means to be human? So for these 4 Sundays, we will interrogate this idea. We will do so from a number of different perspectives and will be helped by people from a number of different professions: a surgeon, an educator, a psychologist, and a biblical scholar. But before we hear these words read to us in their original context, we are going to sing together a hymn that speaks of ancient words. So for those of us who hold to Christian faith, these are the words that we come back to Sunday by Sunday. But for all of us, these are words with history. And so would you stand with me as we sing this beautiful hymn?
Amen. I'm subbing for Kate, and it's my delight to read to you Psalm 139, 1 to 18. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, oh Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind, and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand is on me. Even there your right hand leads me and holds me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, and none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end, and I am still with you. Your word is a lamp to my feet.
As with all of the Psalms, Psalm 139 is first and foremost a prayer. It developed in the form that we have it today as an expression of worship, liturgy. The people walked together toward the temple to meet with God, and they would speak out these psalms, these prayers. But it began as a very personal expression of faith and even lament. The speaker of the psalm is in trouble. He has enemies who don't care for him or for the power that he holds. And so they have brought charges against him in the equivalent of a court of law. The psalmist must stand and defend himself. And so this psalm is written as an expression of his heart, his feeling, as he confronts the fact that he must defend himself. He must speak on his own behalf. To do that, he protests his innocence before God first. He expresses his innocence before God, proclaiming the fact that God knows everything that there is to know about him. There is nothing hidden from God. There is no crack or crevice or space in his life that God does not know, top to bottom and inside out. And so as you read through the psalm, there is this constant building of this expression of God knows me. God knows where I live. God knows everything that there is to know about me. O Lord, he begins, you have searched me and you know me. Now in verses 13 and 14, the psalmist asserts that his very body, his physical body, is the work of God. And therefore, even his body, with all its nooks and crevices, is known by God. For it is you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. In the original language, the word wonderfully comes from the root verb pala. What it means is that it is something different, striking, or remarkable. Remarkable. It's used routinely through the Psalms to describe the work of God. And here, the work of God is the creation of the human body. The psalmist describes this act of God as remarkable. There are many renderings of these verses in English, and each one is effusive in its language. I praise you because of the wonderful way you created me. Everything you do is marvelous. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. It is amazing to think about. Your workmanship is extraordinary. Or, I thank you, high God, you are breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. So how does all this talk of the human body as marvelous, wonderful, extraordinary, remarkable, how does that gel, how does that square with what we know of the human body today? So because I know very little about the human body, and my friend Wendy knows almost all there is to know, Wendy's going to come and sit next to me here and help us explore that question just a little more. Why don't we welcome Wendy? Now, what you need to know is that Wendy is many things, and this is where we get to embarrass her. She is Professor and Chair of the Monash University Department of Surgery. She is the first woman to ever fill that role. She is also Director of the Centre for Obesity Research and Education, Clinical Lead, I hope I get all of this right, Wendy, for the National Bariatric Surgery Registry. She's published more articles and attracted more funding than I could ever imagine. And all of this is extraordinary. But the most important thing that we need to know at Collins Street Baptist Church is that Wendy is the oldest daughter of Glenda Brown. And that's really all that matters. Yeah? As far as we are concerned, Wendy, any daughter of Glenda's is a friend of ours. So welcome to you, and thank you for being brave enough to do this with me today.
Thank you for asking me.
As it happens, Wendy, you and I have known each other for a little while. I was a very green associate pastor at the Waverley Baptist Church back in the late 1980s. That dates us both. And as I recall, and I think I'm right here, I began at Waverley Baptist Church the same year that you began studying medicine at Monash. Would that be right?
Yeah, I started in 1987.
Yes. That's the year, the magic year. Wendy, if you can cast your mind back all of those years, what was it that attracted you to medicine in the first place? And is it the same thing that keeps you there today?
I think, well, my mum, who, if you know my mum, she's never wrong. Mum remembers that I wanted to be a doctor from the age of 4 or 5. She remembers me saying after going to the doctor that this is what I wanted to do one day, I wanted to be a doctor. I remember more strongly wanting to be a doctor probably from about year 10. My recollection when I was younger is that I wanted to drive the lifts at Myers because they had those really cool levers, and I thought that that would be a good job. But I remember we were living in New Zealand at the time in Wellington, and we went to a Presbyterian church there actually, but some missionaries came back and showed, it was a slideshow in those days, we didn't have PowerPoint, about their experiences in Africa and the people that they'd been able to help, and I thought, that would be a really amazing thing to be able to help people. I was good at science, I enjoyed maths, but I was really sort of struggling to think that I'd be a scientist or sort of do engineering or anything, and I thought, well, maybe a doctor's something I could do. So I started out really thinking it was a great way to help people, but also sort of combined what I seemed to be reasonably good at school. And there was no doctors in our family. We didn't really, you couldn't do work experience really in medicine in those days. I did my work experience in marketing with Dad at Unilever, which I enjoyed as well. But I was really just drawn to that opportunity to help people. And so I came back to boarding school in Australia because I knew I wanted to go to boarding school here and had my heart set on medicine. So in retrospect, it was probably a bit silly just doing year 12 in Australia, but I did it, and I got into medicine at Monash by 1 mark. And I think it was the 1 year that the mark ever dropped. So I was very fortunate to get in. And then when I got there, the first 3 years was fairly dry, a lot of science and a lot of learning things. But then I hit the wards and I just loved it. And I think what really, and there's times I hate it now. There's times I still mostly love it. I think I've got one of the most privileged jobs in the world. I get to walk with people at vulnerable points in their life and be part of an important part of their life history. I don't just put my hands on people, I actually put my hands in people, I suppose. I get to fix things, which is very satisfying, you know, to help people in that way. But it also is very challenging because it does always come back onto you. So I think what keeps me in it is the fact that I still get to help people, I still get to apply that knowledge. But I think increasingly it's what I don't know that makes me want to keep going and keep learning and seeing if I can keep improving myself, but also outcomes for other people.
Wendy, we've got this ancient proposition that we've talked about this morning, that we are wonderfully made, that the human body is a remarkable thing. You've been practicing medicine for more than 30 years. Through 4 decades, you have been intimately engaged inside the human body, perhaps more intimately than most of us could even imagine. What is there in your experience as a surgeon, that would support this idea that the body is wonderful or remarkable?
The body is amazing. It is resilient, it is strong, it can be fragile, but it can adapt to most things that we do to it. Humans, we can't create bodies like ours because it's not just all your systems that work together. It's the spirit that drives it, it's the emotion, it's everything. It just comes together so wonderfully. And so when I operate every day, I operate mainly on the stomach and esophagus. So the esophagus is the tube that connects your mouth to your stomach. When I remove the esophagus for cancer, then I have to then replumb it because you can't leave people without anywhere for food to go. So we drag the stomach up into the chest, or sometimes we bring it up to the neck and we sew it back together. And people have to adapt the way they eat, they have to change what they're doing. In doing that, we have to push, when we do the operation, I have to push the heart to one side, I have to collapse the lung down, I have to make sure I don't go anywhere near the airways. But we're able to tease it all out and stitch it back together, and for the first few weeks people are like babies again. They're on liquids, then they're on baby food, then they're on puree. But within a year, they're eating pretty normally again. The body is wonderfully made and it adapts to scenarios that you could never imagine. The liver, if we cut out a bit of your liver, it will grow back. Now there's things that don't grow back, so your brain or your heart, for example, if you have a stroke or if you have a bad heart attack, it doesn't grow back, but blood vessels grow around it, or the body changes, or if you, after a stroke, get a limp, your body changes again. So it's this, I guess the word we use in medicine is plasticity. It's the ability for the body to adapt to whatever happens that is incredible. What also never ceases to amaze me is that every day in each of us, we probably have a cancer sitting somewhere. So a lot of the surgery I do is cancer surgery. But our body sees those bad cells and it kills them. So, you know, we are designed to really survive, I guess. And human beings have tried to replicate that with robots. We've tried to replicate that with artificial organs, but nothing is as fearfully or wonderfully made as the original. And I just feel really blessed by it. And I love the psalmist saying that you're knit together in the womb, because that's really, they had no idea really about embryology, I suppose, in those days. And I know you've got gynecologists and obstetricians that know a lot more about this than me, but you know, from two little cells coming together, it knits together and these amazing organ systems develop. And they work together so perfectly in such harmony when the body's well, and even when it's unwell, it manages to adapt and change. But we all, unfortunately, are not immortal. And the body also, I guess, recognises that God never intended us to be immortal.
Yes. Yeah. Back in the age, Wendy, when the psalm first appeared, the understanding of how our body functions was much more limited than our understanding today. So quite simply, if the body flourished, it was the blessing of God, and if the body failed, it was the curse of God. Sickness was understood primarily through the lens of God's judgment. Everything that went wrong was, in a sense, because you are wrong. You have acted badly or poorly or etc. Thankfully today we have a much more sophisticated, nuanced, intelligent understanding of the body and its failings. And those who work in medicine would confront those failings every day, those frailties of the human body. You would know better than most of us that the body is not always wonderful or remarkable. Just last Sunday, one of our members shared very movingly of the loss of his wife to cancer. Sometimes things don't go as we would hope they would go. I imagine that your decades in medicine have led you to some pretty challenging places with, you've learned as a surgeon about frailty and fragility. What has that taught you? What has it reminded you of?
I think most of the time our bodies work beautifully, but then sometimes they break down. And whilst the psalmist may not have understood, there was a lot more, "Well, God, why have you cursed me with this affliction?" They did also understand that there was things you could do in your lifestyle to change that. So, for example, fasting was very much ritualised in most cultures, avoiding pork, avoiding shellfish, which things you can't safely refrigerate. So I think over time, the ancient people did have understandings around what our own contribution can be to our health, or things we can do to change our health. So I think now, most of the time I like to think, well, there's a reason why things happen. I smoke, therefore I got a lung cancer, or I didn't exercise and therefore I got a heart attack, things. But so I think what my job does is remind me is there's so many things that we don't understand. And sometimes it does feel like it's just not fair. And sometimes you have to embrace that it's just not fair, because you can lie awake at night thinking, what have I done? What have I done? Or, what could I have done differently? But sometimes it's just the way it is. Sometimes it's your genes, sometimes it's what you inherit from your parents, but sometimes there's just no explanation. And being comfortable with sitting with situations where there is just no explanation is one of the challenges, I think, for my job, but probably for all of us, because it's always easier to cope with something that you understand, I think.
Yes.
And just this weekend, I've got a patient who's been admitted to hospital, and it's 5 months after I operated on her, and she's got a terrible infection, and it doesn't make sense. The scans don't make sense. The scenario doesn't make sense. And you lie in bed at night thinking, what could I have done differently 5 months ago? But sometimes you just have to say it doesn't make sense. And that's where my faith is so important to me, I guess, that the older I get, the more I realise I don't know, the more scenarios that don't make sense, that I think I've learnt all this stuff over 30 years and I should be able to make sense of it. But actually, sometimes it just is what it is, and it's God's will, not my will, and I have to trust.
Wendy, on a more personal level, have there been moments when the frailty of your own body has struck you in a particular way?
My own body? I hurt my knee skiing just before COVID, and that was a real reminder to me of what it's like not to be very fully bodily able, because I've always been able to do everything I want. I'm very fortunate, very fit, very healthy, used to run 15 Ks 4 or 5 times a week. And then to suddenly not be able to use my knee and have to go on the part of the tram that's easier to access, be on a tram with crutches. It was actually, I found it very annoying and very frustrating. But on a professional level, it just reminded me how brave so many of my patients are. Even like the Alfred Hospital is a very old hospital, like it was built in 1874, and we have got a modern bit on the corner, but the majority of our hospital and our theatres was built in 1978. So it's not really designed as a modern hospital at all. And so it's brave for our patients to even come and see us there now, as having gone through that experience, of having to get on and off trams with my crutches, and then wearing a brace, not be able to use the stairs, be crammed into a lift with all the other people. And so I think it was a very humbling experience in a way, and reminded me of how brave my patients are every day when they come to see me.
Wow. Wendy, as a surgeon, you travel with people, as you said earlier, you travel with people through some of the most difficult and vulnerable passages of their lives, times when the body is both wonderful and awful. What has this taught you about being human?
So many times we think we know what's going to happen. So if you come in with appendicitis and I cut out your appendix, pretty much all the time I can say you'll go home the next day and be well. But every once in a while, someone ends up getting a bigger infection and something else happens. Similarly with the patient I'm thinking about today, that 99 times out of 100 this operation goes very smoothly, and this seems to be a 1 in a million event, 5 months down the track. So I can do my very best technically, but our body is so much more than the technical. It's more than just the organs so our organs knit together perfectly. Our liver feeds the stomach, feeds the gut. The liver in turn is processing all our dead blood cells. Our dead blood cells then get turned into bile. Our urine comes from, the other waste products. Our lungs provide the oxygen. The heart pumps the oxygen around. We are intimately woven together so that each system works together beautifully. And when we remove it, as I said at the beginning, typically your body adapts. But we're so much more than these systems of organs that interconnect that can adapt. We also have this human spirit that surrounds it and a soul that feeds us. And we have emotions. So when I went to Monash University, we were taught in a biopsychological and sociological model. We believed in the biopsychosocial model of medicine, where we're not just our biology, we're our psychology and our sociology. And each of those things feed into a disease process. So over the years, you see scenarios where people have had one operation and they should go home the next day, but they're in hospital a week later. And that can be because something went wrong with the operation, but it can also be because psychologically they haven't had the armoury to help them get through it, or sociologically there isn't the people at home to support them. And the body will respond accordingly, and sometimes that can be unpredictable. And sometimes you can do the perfect operation. I still think back to some traumas that I've looked after at the Alfred, and you've knitted it all back together and you think they should survive and they don't survive, and you don't really understand it. Same with cancer operations, and that can be very, very challenging. But it just brings you back to the fact that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I didn't make you didn't make us,
Yes.
God made us.
Yes.
And ultimately it's in his domain as to what your journey is over this lifetime and how you deal with it. And the thing that I still struggle with is, you walk with not just the patient but their families, and helping support families through things when things go well or don't go well can sometimes also be really challenging.
Yeah. Wendy, my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and he lived a wonderfully fruitful and healthy life. But the last year was awful in every possible way. And perhaps a couple of weeks before he died, I remember going to the Dandenong Hospital and finding him in the hospital, laying on the floor, naked, clawing at the walls, psychosis. And it was devastating to see my father reduced to this. But in an odd way, it kind of reminded me of sitting with my daughter in the intensive care unit just days after she was born. That incredible frailty of human life, that cycle of life, that returning to a place of complete vulnerability. So the vulnerability of our humanity is something that you would see all the time, that we are vulnerable people. And even though you as a surgeon would bring tremendous expertise, there must be points at which you feel your own vulnerability. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that's really true. We are vulnerable. And some of the hardest conversations you can have as a surgeon is saying, I can't operate on you.
Yes.
I mean, part of the reason, I never wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be a GP or an obstetrician. That was really where I wanted to go. But I think I had some really great mentors that said to me, you should think about surgery. And what appealed to me was that you fixed people. I'm kind of type A, kind of like a problem and solving a problem. And so some of the hardest conversations you have as a surgeon is saying, actually, this disease is too far advanced, or there isn't an operation that I can do to fix you. And your journey now is different. Your goals are different. It's not about necessarily about healing or long life. It's about quality of life for as long as you can get. And having an operation might actually steal from that. And they're very hard things to do, and it's, I think, particularly hard when you're a younger surgeon, because you still want to do the operation, you want to fix people, but as you get older you realise that sometimes that's you know all along that it's the wrong thing to do, but the conversations never get easier because people come to me because they want surgery or they're expecting surgery. So to say, I can't help you, and it's not just cancer, it can be, I do obesity surgery, and there's some people that you just, you know, doing an operation is the wrong thing for those people because of other issues. And it is that frailty and and also it's my opinion. So they call it a surgical opinion or like a legal opinion. You could go and see someone else and get a different opinion. And so you have to be humble enough to also say, get another opinion because I may not be right. So surgeons are not God. We might like to think we are, and in the operating theatre we might behave like we are because we're the captain of the team, everyone's focused on us and the patient. It's probably genuinely the only place that I'm mindful in my whole life, because all I'm doing is thinking about that task and what I'm doing for that person, and the whole team in theatre's there for the patient, but they're listening to me. And so you need to have some sort of arrogance to believe you can cut something else and put it back together. But ultimately I'm not God. And I need to remember that. And I do say a little prayer before every operation, please guide my hands and my heart, because it's not just about my hands, it's about my heart. And it's important to me to know that God is with me and helping me make decisions.
Well, Wendy, we are very glad that there are people like you in our hospitals. We acknowledge our dependence so much upon people like you and others in our congregation who work in similar fields. So thank you for coming and sharing part of your story with us today.
Thank you for
Let's
having
say
me.
thank you to Wendy. Thanks, Wendy. For the next few moments, I'm going to ask you to indulge me and join me in a bit of a meditative exercise, if you would. For those of you who enjoy such things, this will be good, and for others, this may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay, it doesn't go very long. So for the next few moments, I want to ask you to concentrate on your body. So close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. This body of yours is the only body you have ever known. You've lived in it for a long time. Perhaps you have a good relationship with your body, or perhaps it is complicated, painful, but it's yours. Your body is part of who you are. So I want you to think for a moment, what can you identify in your body that is remarkable? Your feet, perhaps? Your legs? They've held you up for all these years. Your back? Your shoulders? They've borne a lot of strain. Maybe it's your hands. Where would you be without those? Your arms. They've held, they've hugged, they've protected. Perhaps it's your ears or your eyes for all that they've seen and heard. Your mouth, your mind. What can you name as remarkable about your own body? And then what is there in your body that reminds you of your frailty? Those legs that ache, perhaps. That back that won't let you sleep. That extra weight that you just can't shift. those arthritic fingers that won't do what they used to do. Some of you I know are living with illness in your body, like a foreign invader, and a constant reminder of your own mortality. So in the midst of all of that, I wonder if you, in your body, can say those words for yourself. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Would you say that out loud with me? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Once more, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. As we move into prayer, you may want to bring that consciousness, that awareness with you into prayer. The aspects of your body you would want God to be more fully present to. There may be the bodies of others for whom you are deeply concerned and you want to pray for them. We will take some moments of quietness. There will be some music that plays. You might just choose to sit where you are and hold those thoughts, those people, those aspects of your own experience, or you may wish to come forward and light a taper as an expression of your gratitude, your longing, your need, or your care for others. You are welcome to do any of those things. We pray together. We're going to sing together a final hymn. It is a hymn that speaks of God in all sorts of ways and through all stages of life. So would you stand with me as we sing, Bring Many Names. So we lift our hands together. My friends, receive now the fullness of God's peace, grace and love. May it invade every corner, every element of who you are, and every moment of the week that is to come. Go in peace and know that God is with you. Amen.